10 ground beef dinners once defined American kitchens in the 1970s, and most people have forgotten them completely. These meals were not trends or experiments. They were dependable dishes cooked in millions of homes, night after night, because families needed food that was affordable, filling, and reliable. Ground beef made that possible. It turned simple ingredients into full meals that could feed parents, children, and unexpected guests. These recipes came from church cookbooks, newspaper columns, and handwritten cards tucked into kitchen drawers. They reflected the rhythm of daily life during a decade shaped by rising prices, busy households, and changing traditions. Today, these dishes are rarely cooked, rarely discussed, and almost never remembered. When they disappeared, they took stories with them. This video brings those meals back, one by one, exactly as they were once made. Watch closely, because some of these recipes fed your family, even if no one talks about them anymore. Porcupine meatballs were a familiar dinner in 1970s America, especially in homes where ground beef had to stretch as far as possible. The name came from uncooked rice mixed into the meat, which poked out as the meatballs simmered, giving them a spiky look that children never forgot. This dish was simple, affordable, and reliable, which made it a weekly staple for many families. Ground beef was combined with rice, onion, salt, and pepper, then rolled by hand at the kitchen table. The meatballs were placed into a shallow pan and covered with canned tomato sauce or stewed tomatoes thinned with water. They simmered slowly on the stove, filling the house with a warm, familiar smell that signaled dinner was coming. As the meat cooked, the rice softened, soaking up the sauce and stretching the meal without anyone feeling shorted. Porcupine meatballs mattered because they solved a problem. 1 pound of beef could feed a family of 5, sometimes more, without anyone leaving the table hungry. Leftovers were packed for school lunches or reheated the next night. Nothing was wasted. Over time, this recipe faded away. Convenience foods replaced slow-simmered meals, and the idea of adding rice to meat began to feel old-fashioned. Today, few people remember why this dish existed in the first place. Porcupine meatballs were not meant to impress. They were meant to feed, comfort, and hold a family together at the end of a long day. That quiet purpose is exactly why they deserve to be remembered. In the 1970s, meals like this were shared around small tables, with parents serving portions carefully and children waiting their turn. The dish carried patience, thrift, and care. It reflected a time when dinner mattered, even when money was tight. Those values lived quietly inside every simmering pot. Hamburger stroganoff became popular in the 1970s because it delivered the comfort of a classic dish without the cost of expensive meat. Traditional beef stroganoff used steak, but many families replaced it with ground beef to make the meal affordable and practical for everyday cooking. The result was a creamy, filling dinner that felt special without being extravagant. Ground beef was browned in a skillet with chopped onion until fully cooked. Flour was stirred in to thicken the mixture, followed by beef broth or water. Canned mushroom soup was often added, giving the sauce its signature richness without requiring fresh cream. Some households included sliced mushrooms if they were available, but many relied entirely on pantry staples. The mixture simmered until thick, then was finished with sour cream stirred in just before serving. The dish was usually served over egg noodles, which absorbed the sauce and stretched the meal further. 1 pan could feed an entire family, and leftovers reheated well the next day. For many children, this was the first meal that felt grown up, even though it came together quickly on a weeknight. Hamburger stroganoff faded as boxed dinners and frozen meals replaced home cooking. The flavor became associated with another era, one tied to school nights, kitchen tables, and handwritten recipe cards. This dish mattered because it balanced comfort and economy. It showed how families adapted familiar recipes to meet real needs. Hamburger stroganoff was not a shortcut. It was a solution, built from necessity and care. In the 1970s, meals like this carried reassurance. They reminded families that even simple ingredients could produce warmth, stability, and a sense of normal life. When this recipe disappeared, a small piece of that everyday comfort went with it. Taco pie was a 1970s ground beef classic that brought the flavors of Tex-Mex into everyday American kitchens long before fast food tacos dominated the culture. It combined convenience, affordability, and familiarity, making it a weekly favorite for families looking for something different without spending extra time or money. Its layers of seasoned beef, cheese, and pastry created a hearty, satisfying meal that was both easy to prepare and pleasing to the eye. The foundation of taco pie was ground beef cooked with onion and taco seasoning, often made from a blend of chili powder, cumin, and paprika. Once the meat was browned, it was layered in a pie dish with shredded cheddar cheese and a simple pastry crust, either store-bought or homemade. Some versions added a can of diced tomatoes or a layer of refried beans for extra texture and flavor. The pie was baked in the oven until golden and bubbly, filling the kitchen with a scent that hinted at celebration even on a quiet weeknight. Taco pie was more than a recipe, it was a solution for busy households. It could feed a large family with minimal effort, and leftovers were often reheated for lunches or dinners later in the week. It was visually appealing, practical, and flavorful, offering a sense of pride to the cook who served it. Over time, taco pie disappeared from most tables as dinner trends shifted toward frozen convenience foods and more complex international flavors. Yet for those who remember it, this dish embodies a moment when families adapted new influences into home cooking, creating meals that were both familiar and exciting. Taco pie represents the ingenuity of 1970s American kitchens. It reminds us that even simple ingredients could transform into something special, bringing families together around the table in a way that modern shortcuts rarely replicate. Salisbury steak casserole was a cornerstone of 1970s home cooking, offering the hearty satisfaction of a steak dinner without the expense of premium cuts. Families relied on ground beef to create tender, flavorful patties, baked or simmered in a rich sauce, and paired with simple sides to feed everyone at the table. This dish combined economy with comfort, making it a reliable choice for weeknight meals. Ground beef was mixed with breadcrumbs, egg, and seasonings, then shaped into oval patties. These were often seared briefly in a skillet before being arranged in a baking dish. The sauce was a mixture of condensed mushroom soup, water or broth, and sometimes onions, poured over the patties to simmer and infuse flavor throughout. The casserole was then baked until bubbly, with the sauce thickening into a rich, savory coating that clung to each patty. Families appreciated this meal because it stretched limited ingredients while still feeling indulgent. Leftover casserole could be reheated for lunches or repurposed over toast or rice. Its appeal lay in simplicity, flavor, and reliability, traits highly valued in 1970s kitchens. Over time, Salisbury steak casserole largely disappeared, replaced by pre-packaged meals and quicker alternatives. The dish faded not because it lacked taste, but because modern conveniences made cooking from scratch less common. Salisbury steak casserole mattered because it reflected the careful planning and resourcefulness of households during the decade. It was a practical meal that nourished both body and spirit. For those who remember, it represents a time when dinners were made with intention, shared with care, and savored slowly, values that transcend the recipe itself. Cheeseburger pie was a 1970s kitchen staple that transformed familiar fast food flavors into a comforting, homemade dish. Families who wanted the taste of a cheeseburger without the expense or hassle of takeout embraced this recipe. It was filling, affordable, and visually appealing, making it a hit with children and adults alike. The foundation of cheeseburger pie was browned ground beef seasoned with salt, pepper, and occasionally onion or garlic powder. Once cooked, the beef was layered in a pie crust, topped with shredded cheddar cheese, and sometimes a thin layer of ketchup or tomato sauce for moisture and flavor. Some households added diced pickles or a sprinkling of mustard to mimic the classic burger taste. The pie was then baked until the crust was golden and the cheese melted into a gooey, savory topping. Cheeseburger pie excelled in practicality. It could feed a family of 4 to 6 with just a single pound of ground beef. Leftovers were easily reheated, making it a convenient option for busy weeknights or packed lunches. Its simple preparation and hearty flavor made it a dependable favorite across many households. Over the years, cheeseburger pie largely vanished from family tables as frozen meals and fast food options became more accessible. Yet for those who remember it, this dish represents a moment when home cooks cleverly adapted familiar flavors to create satisfying, complete meals. Cheeseburger pie was more than just a recipe. It was a solution for feeding families with care and resourcefulness. It combined taste, efficiency, and comfort, embodying the practical creativity that defined 1970s American kitchens. For anyone who grew up with it, the memory lingers in every cheesy, savory bite. Ground beef and noodle bake was a practical, comforting dish that appeared on countless American tables in the 1970s. It was affordable, easy to prepare, and satisfying for families needing to stretch both ingredients and time. This casserole-style meal combined pantry staples with ground beef to create a filling, one-dish dinner that could feed large households with minimal effort. The recipe began with browning ground beef in a skillet, often seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of onion or garlic. Cooked egg noodles were then layered with the beef and mixed with a creamy sauce made from a can of condensed mushroom or cream of celery soup, occasionally thinned with milk. Shredded cheddar cheese was added to enhance flavor and provide a gooey topping once baked. Some variations included canned vegetables such as peas or green beans, adding color and nutrition while keeping costs low. This dish was a solution for busy families. It could be assembled quickly, baked while the household attended to chores or homework, and served as a complete meal straight from the oven. Leftovers were easy to reheat, making it practical for lunches or second dinners. Ground beef and noodle bake faded from popularity as convenience foods, frozen meals, and fast food options became more common. The recipe's simplicity and reliability were replaced by quicker, pre-packaged alternatives. Yet this dish mattered. It reflected the ingenuity and resourcefulness of 1970s home cooks, who balanced nutrition, flavor, and economy. Every serving carried the comfort of a homemade meal, shared with care. For those who remember, ground beef and noodle bake is more than nostalgia. It is a reminder of how simple ingredients, when thoughtfully combined, could nourish both body and family life. Ground beef and noodle bake was a practical, comforting dish that appeared on countless American tables in the 1970s. It was affordable, easy to prepare, and satisfying for families needing to stretch both ingredients and time. This casserole-style meal combined pantry staples with ground beef to create a filling, one-dish dinner that could feed large households with minimal effort. The recipe began with browning ground beef in a skillet, often seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of onion or garlic. Cooked egg noodles were then layered with the beef and mixed with a creamy sauce made from a can of condensed mushroom or cream of celery soup, occasionally thinned with milk. Shredded cheddar cheese was added to enhance flavor and provide a gooey topping once baked. Some variations included canned vegetables such as peas or green beans, adding color and nutrition while keeping costs low. This dish was a solution for busy families. It could be assembled quickly, baked while the household attended to chores or homework, and served as a complete meal straight from the oven. Leftovers were easy to reheat, making it practical for lunches or second dinners. Ground beef and noodle bake faded from popularity as convenience foods, frozen meals, and fast food options became more common. The recipe's simplicity and reliability were replaced by quicker, prepackaged alternatives. Yet this dish mattered. It reflected the ingenuity and resourcefulness of 1970s home cooks, who balanced nutrition, flavor, and economy. Every serving carried the comfort of a homemade meal, shared with care. For those who remember, ground beef and noodle bake is more than nostalgia. It is a reminder of how simple ingredients, when thoughtfully combined, could nourish both body and family life. Beef and potato casserole was a 1970s staple that embodied the era's approach to home cooking: simple, hearty, and practical. Families relied on ground beef and inexpensive staples like potatoes to create meals that could feed a household without stretching the budget. The dish was easy to prepare, filling, and versatile, making it a weekly favorite for many kitchens. Preparation began by browning ground beef with onions, salt, and pepper in a skillet. Thinly sliced or diced potatoes were layered in a baking dish and seasoned lightly. Some families added a can of cream of mushroom soup or a small amount of milk to create a binding sauce, ensuring the casserole stayed moist as it baked. Occasionally, shredded cheese was sprinkled on top for flavor and visual appeal. The dish was baked until the potatoes were tender, the beef fully cooked, and the top golden and bubbly. This casserole was practical. One pan could feed an entire family, and leftovers often became school or work lunches. Its ingredients were affordable and usually already on hand, which made it reliable during times of financial restraint or busy schedules. Beef and potato casserole slowly disappeared from kitchens as convenience foods, frozen dinners, and faster recipes gained popularity. Yet, it represented more than sustenance. It reflected care, planning, and the ability to turn simple ingredients into a satisfying meal. For families in the 1970s, this dish was both a solution and a comfort. It showcased the resourcefulness of home cooks and provided warmth around the table. Remembering beef and potato casserole is a way to honor a time when meals were practical, thoughtful, and shared with intention. Its disappearance leaves a small gap in culinary history that nostalgia can help fill. Swedish meatball casserole was a popular variation of the classic European dish, adapted for 1970s American kitchens where convenience and budget mattered. Ground beef replaced more expensive cuts of meat, while pantry staples helped stretch the dish to feed entire families. This casserole was simple to prepare, comforting to eat, and visually appealing on the dinner table. The recipe began by combining ground beef with breadcrumbs, egg, and seasoning to form small, tender meatballs. These were lightly browned in a skillet before being layered in a baking dish. A creamy sauce, usually made from a can of cream of mushroom soup, milk, and a dash of nutmeg or black pepper, was poured over the meatballs. Some households added a layer of cooked noodles or mashed potatoes to make the casserole heartier and more filling. The dish was baked until golden and bubbling, filling the home with a warm, inviting aroma. Swedish meatball casserole was valued for its practicality. It could feed a large family on a modest budget, and leftovers were easily reheated for lunch or dinner. Its mild flavors appealed to children, while adults appreciated its comforting richness. Over time, this dish disappeared from many households as convenience meals, frozen foods, and global cuisine options became more popular. Despite this, it reflects the ingenuity of home cooks who adapted traditional recipes to suit their resources and time constraints. Swedish meatball casserole mattered because it transformed simple ingredients into a balanced, satisfying meal. It symbolized family care, thrift, and the ability to create warmth and comfort from everyday pantry staples, a quiet culinary legacy of 1970s America that deserves to be remembered. Taco casserole was a 1970s favorite that brought the excitement of Mexican-inspired flavors into everyday American kitchens. Families wanted meals that were quick, affordable, and satisfying, and this dish delivered all three. It combined ground beef with accessible ingredients to create a layered, flavorful dinner that could feed an entire household. The base started with browned ground beef cooked with onions, salt, pepper, and a pinch of chili powder or taco seasoning. Corn tortillas or crushed tortilla chips were layered in a baking dish, creating a foundation that absorbed flavors as the casserole baked. The beef was layered over the tortillas, followed by shredded cheese, canned tomatoes, and sometimes beans or corn. Some households added a mild salsa or a sprinkling of olives for extra taste. The casserole was baked until the cheese melted and the layers fused together, forming a rich, savory meal. Taco casserole was practical and versatile. It could be prepared in advance, baked when convenient, and served as a complete dinner straight from the oven. Leftovers were easily reheated for lunches or additional meals. Its appeal lay in simplicity, flavor, and adaptability, which made it a dependable choice for busy families. Over time, taco casserole faded from home menus as frozen dinners and quick-service foods became more common. Yet it represented a moment when cooks experimented with new flavors while keeping meals grounded in economy and convenience. This dish mattered because it demonstrated creativity within constraints. It showed that families could bring excitement to the table without complex recipes or costly ingredients. Taco casserole embodies the resourcefulness, practicality, and comfort that defined 1970s American kitchens and deserves recognition in culinary history. Beef enchilada casserole was a 1970s adaptation of traditional Mexican enchiladas, made accessible for American kitchens where convenience, budget, and family appeal were priorities. Ground beef replaced more expensive meats, and pantry staples helped create a filling, flavorful dish that could satisfy a household without demanding hours of preparation. This casserole was simple, hearty, and visually satisfying, making it a favorite for weeknight dinners. The dish began by browning ground beef in a skillet, often with onions, garlic, and a touch of chili powder or paprika. Soft tortillas, either corn or flour, were layered in a baking dish, alternating with the cooked beef, shredded cheddar cheese, and canned enchilada or tomato sauce. Some families added beans or corn to stretch the casserole further. The final layer of cheese melted into a golden topping as the casserole baked, producing a rich aroma that filled kitchens and drew families to the table. Beef enchilada casserole was valued for its practicality. One pan could feed a large family, leftovers reheated well, and the ingredients were inexpensive and readily available. Its combination of flavor, ease, and versatility made it a dependable choice for 1970s households. Over the years, this dish largely disappeared from family menus, replaced by frozen Mexican-style dinners and fast food alternatives. Yet it reflected a moment of adaptation and ingenuity in American kitchens, where home cooks balanced flavor, economy, and convenience. Beef enchilada casserole mattered because it brought excitement and comfort to the table using simple ingredients. It showcased the resourcefulness of 1970s home cooks and the importance of shared family meals, leaving behind a culinary memory worth remembering even decades later.